Nick Stack. I'm pleased to introduce Nick, who uses they, he pronouns. Nick currently serves as a vice president of the Association of California State Employees, ACSED, while working as a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging analyst at the Office of State Public Defender. Within their agency, Nick makes a significant contribution as the LEAP coordinator on the Disability Advisory Committee. Their unique perspective spans both employee advocacy and professional expertise in creating more inclusive workplace. So without further ado, Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bobby, so much for that introduction. As Bobby mentioned, my name is Nick Stack. I have long, dark brown hair, a beard, and I'm wearing light gray glasses and a green shirt. My Zoom background is currently celebrating Earth Day. In addition to the activities that Bobby mentioned, I also am a member of the steering group for the DEI statewide committee, a participant in the statewide DEI work group. I'm on GARE's HR Equity Community of Practice for the Sacramento region, and I participate in planning DOR's Pathways to State Employment series. I think networking with other professionals in this space is a great way to find support as well as learn best practices, and I will put some information about some of those in the chat right there. I have a history of cancer, which includes an acquired brain injury from a tumor. I think I'm in good company today where I have multiple other people mention that they had brain injuries of some sort. So brain injury people represented today. I was asked briefly to speak about the DAC at the Office of the State Public Defender, challenges that we face of having a DAC in a small agency, and how the DAC works together with the rest of our agency. If you're not familiar with the Office of the State Public Defender, we provide advocacy for those facing capital sentences, and we empower the defense community to ensure effective and equitable representation for all. At OSPD, I do diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging analyst. I have a colleague that's engaged in the same function, and we are roughly a 100-person agency. And my general goal in my position is to assist the department in its ongoing efforts to be a great place to work. A major topic for our DAC has been our parity rate. At the end of 2023, our office was at 45% of parity. As of the report that came out at the end of last month, the office is currently at 113% of the parity rate, which means that 18.8% of our staff are identifying as persons with disabilities. I believe this increase came about because of executive support as well as coordination between our DAC, HR, and the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging unit. Without close coordination and collaboration between HR, the DAC, and DEIB, I don't believe that we would have been able to make the changes that allowed this increase in the rate. Some of the changes that we've made in that time include having job announcements and interview questions reviewed by DEIB unit with an equity lens prior to posting. Interview questions are being reviewed by the DEIB unit with an equity lens. Participating in the California State Bar DEI seal, and then being awarded the highest level, which is the gold seal. I'll give a shout out to Paula who spoke earlier, as Disability Rights California is also a gold seal recipient. We have clear policies around reasonable accommodations. At hiring kickoffs, we present a PowerPoint presentation about LEAP, the availability of the LEAP preferred hiring process, and persons with disabilities for any classification that's eligible for LEAP to encourage hiring managers to use the LEAP program. We include DEIB questions on our annual stay survey, and we make changes to internal policies based on the responses. We include DEIB questions on exit interviews, and we make changes to internal policies based on the responses of those. We provide space at the for the DAC and internal communications, such as our newsletters. We highlight awareness months for persons with disabilities. We provide regular DEIB office hours that address particular topics, as well as provide open space for discussion. We try to make sure that we review other internal policies with the DEI lens. And we do additional outreach to diverse communities when we have job openings, which includes reaching out to organizations comprised of persons with disabilities. Because our agency is small, our DAC is also quite small. At any given time, we have roughly 5 active members on our DAC. In order to increase DAC membership, our Equal Employment Officer and the DIB unit meet with each new hire, and we welcome them to our agency. As part of this welcome meeting, we encourage them to join a committee within the agency, and we give them a brief overview of each committee, which includes the DAC. We believe that doing this has greatly increased our DAC membership as well as membership on other committees and increases employee engagement. Bobby, that's all I have really to speak on today.
No, that's
When
great.
Alex approached me, I did say this would be brief, but
No. This is wonderful. I'm
okay.
glad. I do have few follow-up questions.
Sure. And I did want to say if anyone is interested about any of those specific bullet points that I mentioned or wants to work on implementing those in their agency, please do reach out to me. I'm always happy to help.
All right. Quick question about the executive support. You mentioned a very important point for DAC to be successful and do its mission under the Government Code 19795B. What's important is getting the executive support. After all, under the code, we are supposed to advise the chief executive of the entity. So in your particular DAC, what kind of support did you get that really made a difference of promoting DAC? And remarkably, you have exceeded the minimum threshold of disability parity of 16.6. You're at 18, which is quite an accomplishment. So how'd you do that?
So I think the big part is my agency realized before I came on, and that's part of why I have a job here, is that the parity rate wasn't great, and they also felt that there were other issues relating to DEI, obviously having a disability as part of DEI, at the agency. And so they said, well, let's hire some people and help make that happen. And so one of the things that's in my duty statement is in a DEI role is to support the DAC. So in order for me to support the DAC, I have to go to the DAC, I have to go to their meetings, I have to talk to them, and I have to say, what would you like to see us do? Right? I can bring up ideas to them, and I do that, but I also listen to them when they say things, and I listen to them when they tell me what problems that they've heard or had, or what problems that existed historically in the agency. My boss is our Equal Employment Officer, and she reports directly to the head of our agency. And I think that positioning is very helpful because that means that and she attends the DAC meetings to listen. She does not speak much at the DAC meetings, but she attends them to listen and understand those concerns. And then, of course, our DAC chair meets annually with the head of our agency to make sure that she's able to have a discussion and bring up those concerns. But it's that support of, oh, we want to look at HR policies. That's fine. That's okay. We need HR data to understand and do our job. That's fine. That's okay. It's that information and that sharing and that relationship and that trust that I think is the executive support component that really helps us be able to do things and go about the mission. Also, just having a culture where we have time and ability. I mean, I don't directly handle requests for RAs, but I know that when they come in, we are able to handle them quickly. We have clear guidelines and a policy about it. I know, for example, that when I asked my EO about relational disability, so like if you have someone in your family, in your household who has a disability and you're asking for an RA based upon that, that's open for consideration. Whereas I've heard at some other agencies, they won't even consider such a thing. I don't know what the result of those again is because I'm not directly involved in the process, but at least I know that we're open to looking at them and considering them just like we would any other RA.
So relational disability, where somebody is disabled within your family, was a consideration that your particular department kind of looked at and were open to having some discussion, but that's not the law though, right? Correct?
It's not the law, but the law
Okay.
doesn't prevent you from doing it as well.
True. But you're just proactive in that sense, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I think that's part of why I'm involved in all those other things is so that I can hear this is happening here, this is happening there, and then I can bring that back to my agency and say, do we have a policy about this? Should we have a policy about this? What are we doing about this?
Right.
And I'll ask the DAC, have you had any of these issues? Let me know. Let's figure out what we need to do about it.
So in other words, you highlight problems as DAC, as part of DAC, and you try to solve it collaboratively within your entity.
Correct.
You also mentioned that during the hiring process, you talk about leap. So that's how do you do that? Like when you hire person, you
Not during the hiring process, internally. So
okay.
before we post a job opening,
Mhm.
HR has a kickoff meeting with the hiring manager, the HR professionals who are handling that internally, and then I or my coworker are also invited as DEIB. If that classification that we're opening up a position for is LEAP eligible, and there's been great strides in the number of LEAP eligible classifications recently, it changes every time I look at it now. We make sure to provide this brief PowerPoint that talks about persons with disabilities, why you might want to hire persons with disabilities, and what the LEAP preferred hiring process is, which I saw you put in the agenda, the update and changes. And so we present that PowerPoint to folks who the hiring manager is, so that they can decide if they want to use that process for that hire.
Great. Thank you.
While most of the time they're going to say no, or a lot of our positions aren't LEAP eligible, I think that just giving the hiring manager the knowledge about persons with disabilities has helped to lead to the agency being more open to hiring them.
Okay. There's another question in the chat. Then I'm going to go to Alex. How are you aware of the master plan for developmental disabilities we just launched this past month?
I would have to look at that. If you can send it over, if Michelle can send it to me, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
I think one of the other things, we haven't gotten there yet, but we are very interested in bringing someone on through the state internship program, SIP. We're just waiting on it to be open to more classifications, because it's currently open classifications don't really exist in my agency.
Great. Thank you. Alex, please go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Nick. So, Nick, it sounds like your agency's disability culture has evolved substantially and is working towards having and maintaining a healthy and mature disability culture. Also, I like the interactions aspects that you discussed between the DAC and the EEO. So my question is, in the hiring process, do you have a representative or representatives from the DAC attend any type of new employee orientation meetings to discuss the DAC mandate, disabilities, the agency, et cetera?
So I think I briefly mentioned that my unit and the equal employment officer meet with all new employees. Everyone who's in my unit is also a member of the DAC. So that's 3 out of roughly 5 active members of the DAC, to be honest. So yes, we're talking about the DAC and what it does in those meetings with every new hire.
So I guess a follow-up question to that is, if these 3 of 5 people that are in the DAC weren't in the DAC, would there be room for the DAC to be involved in that process? Right now, maybe it's just coincidence that these 3 people happen to be in the DAC, but
I mean, it's in the duty statement for 2 out of those 5 people to support the DAC.
okay.
So they'd always be involved in that process,
Mhm.
unless duty statements were to change. But yes, if something were to change and no one in that meeting was a member of the DAC, I would make sure to invite someone from the DAC to be in that meeting, because
Okay.
I think it's important to have the DAC in that meeting. For me personally, I see the DAC as the flagship committee, right? You can have ERGs and other kind of internal committees in your agency, but none of those are required by law, whereas having a DAC is required by law. So I see it as a flagship and a basis for having other ERGs and committees within the organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the audience that would like to pick Nick's brain?
There's one question that came in the chat. Says Nick said to be open to more classification. What that means?
Sure. So CalHR has been working on adding additional classifications to the LEAP program. I normally track those simply by going to the CalCareer site and then searching for how many LEAP exams exist. And I noticed that the last time I was updating my slideshow, which was a week or 2 ago, about LEAP, that it looked like an additional 20 or so classifications had been added in the last few months. And so I always get excited every time I see that number go up.
Fantastic. That's great news. CalHR has actually done a good job of adding more LEAP classifications lately. And just so for everyone's benefit, we don't have to wait for CalHR to add a classification on the LEAP list. You can coordinate that. If you have a classification that's not on LEAP, you can coordinate that and CalHR can develop a LEAP test for that. You just have to connect with them, correct? And maybe I should ask this question to our next speaker, Eli, when he comes on. He's the subject matter expert representing CalHR on that matter, unless you know the answer to the question.
I would defer to Eli in this matter.
Okay. All right.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I was about to ask that follow-up question as well about the process to get a, for example, state agency specific classification. If it's not already LEAP eligible, how to go about ensuring you follow the correct process to make it LEAP eligible. And then also, I noticed that there's another question from the audience. I see Glenn has his hand up. Glenn, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Thank you so much, Alex. So sorry, let me lower my hand. Okay. uh, Thank you, Nick, for providing us some insights. And I think Bobby and I had this conversation about the LEAP versus the regular examination. And until now, even after that conversation, I still seem to look at it from a black and white perspective, in that I'm having challenges about the nuances between the two, that I'm not able to really grasp the advantages of LEAP. I think I look at it from a perspective that, it doesn't seem to lead to an immediate permanent classification. So that's, I think, something that that's, I don't know, my eyes are filtered that I cannot see. So maybe if you can enlighten us with some insights about the advantages of LEAP, given that somehow I just cannot see it from my point of view. Thank you.
I can address this briefly, but I think Eli is going to be the subject matter expert on this topic, and so I'm inclined to defer to him. But in general, LEAP is going to allow a person with a disability an easier time of entering into a classification and being able to show that they can do the duties of the position. So it's essentially an extended interview during what's called the JEP, the job examination period. And then at the end of that job examination period, as long as they fulfilled those duties, they are going to become a permanent employee if the position was originally advertised as a position for a permanent employee. So it's a different route that makes things a little bit easier for a person with a disability.
Thank you, Glenn, for that question. And again, reserve that for our next speaker, Eli. He's the expert on this subject, but we'll get back to that. There's another question for Nick that came through the chat, and this question was posted by saying, when you ask to hire folks under the LEAP classification, the LEAP exam, can the hiring manager say no to that we won't hire anyone from LEAP?
My understanding is they can't say no if the classification is LEAP eligible, and they don't even know during the hiring process if candidates are LEAP eligible or not. What I'm asking them to say yes to is to use the LEAP only hiring process effectively through CalHR, where they're saying if enough people apply to a position who are on the LEAP list, we are only going to hire someone from the LEAP list. It's a new option that we have from CalHR that we've only had now for, I think, about a year and a half.
Right.
And not a lot of people are aware of this option or how to utilize it, which is why I'm in these meetings asking that question.
Great. So just to clarify, the normal process when you go apply for any jobs on CalHR, you get eligibility list is created from that if you get on the exam and so forth. And when you apply, if you have a list eligibility, the hiring manager would not know that until they make you the offer, and at which point they will know whether you were LEAP or came to the regular channel, right?
I would defer to Eli as exactly when in the process that the hiring manager is aware.
Okay.
I feel like in some places it may not happen until the person, like after the formal offer occurs.
Right. Okay.
May
That's
I
enough.
chime May I chime in on that?
Yeah, please.
This is the vice chair of the Caltrans SDAC, and I just went to a training where they did talk about the LEAP briefly, and they said that, yes, the hiring manager does not know that the candidate is a LEAP candidate until they make the offer. And then the LEAP coordinator will support the manager through the first year to make sure that they go through the JOC process correctly.
And that's the job examination period for 12 months typically, during which time they're evaluated monthly and given support, guidance, training, whatever. It's comparable to probation, is it not?
That's my understanding, but it's a little more than probation. They get a little more guidance, a little more feedback. Honestly, I think we could all benefit from that. But yeah, and so at Caltrans, we have a coordinator who works with, and I did speak up and say something about it because it sounded like in the past that wasn't always done, but she works with the managers, because not all managers have had a LEAP. A lot of managers have not had a LEAP candidate before, and they don't know the process, but she's there to support them.
Right.
It's supposed to be that way for other departments too.
And Megan just made a good point. Not all person with disabilities use the LEAP list. And not all person who need an RA for an interview are qualified for LEAP. Excellent point. Okay, I think if they need RA for the interview, will they know? I mean, will they not know that you have a disability if you're asking for accommodation during the interview? I think that's the question. And Angelica, please unmute, ask your question if I'm not presenting it accurately.
No, you did fine. Thank you. Because I was saying that because Nick said that they won't know, hiring managers won't know, but if an accommodation is requested for X, Y, and Z, that's not a true statement.
Yeah.
They would know, but they wouldn't know that someone was on the LEAP list. They would simply know that someone needed an accommodation for the interview.
Yeah.
Which is a different level of knowing. But if you need an accommodation in order to succeed in your interview, you need to ask for the accommodation so you can get it.
And someone else, Nick, is asking if you could share your slides with them. Whatever slides you spoke of earlier.
I can do that. I put my email in the chat if folks can email me directly. And
great.
Before the end of the day, I will send out an email.
Right. All right. And Rihanna posted another link here from Kelly Char. That's quite helpful. So do we have any other questions for Nick about DAC, about LEAP, or anything else that Nick just presented on? If not, Nick, we are truly grateful for your presence and knowledge sharing. We always appreciate a perspective that's unique, only comes from experience having to do the type of work that you do. So keep up the good work, and thank you again for showing up here, and please stay on if you're able.